So again, this is a course really about all the runes and really just a base guideline of what the runes do and to help you understand what the runes do and when you would take each of them. And if you don't really know what your champion does, or you want to find an alternative rune page to your champion, you can always see what your champion wants to do and see if there's any different rune page that most people have missed that could be viable on your champion. A random example I'm just going to throw out there would be Hail of Blades Darius, for example. With that said, I'll be going into the Presicion tree first, and then we'll work our way from left to right. So in the Presicion tree, we have 9 mini runes, and then we have the main 4 keystones. I'll start off from left to right, so we'll start with Press the Attack. So what Press the Attack does is if you hit an enemy champion with 3 strikes, or auto attacks rather, in a row, then they will be applied extra bonus damage scaling from 40 to 180 bonus adaptive damage based on your level. And also on top of that, increasing all damage they take by 8 to 12%, also scaling from levels, from all sources for 6 seconds. So, yes?
Oh, something just clicked.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know that's what that did.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no worries. So, what it does is, again, you mostly use it to like amplify yourself. So if you have like a quick way of hitting a target 3 times with auto attacks, or auto attack resets, meaning, for example, Darius W, Garen Q, GPQ, all of these would count towards the consecutive auto attacks towards the press the attack. Other things would be Vayne Q and things like that. So the specific thing that I want to point out is the vulnerability from all sources, which is not only yourself, but any source. So let's say you wanted to try some off-meta support build, but you feel like you don't really support enough. Then maybe you're like taking Conqueror on it when you could maybe take Press the Attack instead and actually amplify your 80 carries damage by a whole 8 to 12%, which can be quite a lot in certain situations. And this also works together if both of you have Press the Attack, meaning if one person hits it with their Press the Attack and you hit them with one, I would believe that it would count towards 2 stacks. The proc damage would obviously only go off once, but just something to keep in mind of. Lethal Tempo, you gain attack speed when hitting a target. That can be different targets, but up to a certain extent, to a maximum of 6 auto attacks. So it gives you 60 to 90% on max stacks for melees and 30 to 54 for ranged. When you've fully stacked it, you also can exceed the maximum limit of 2.5 auto attacks per second, and you also gain a slight increase of range, auto attack range. That would be 50 auto attack range. They did recently change it so that range champions gain the same range increase that melees get, and so it's been pretty good right now. The difference between this and Rune like Conqueror would be you'd mainly take this if your main bulk of damage is just auto attacks and attack speed. So if your champion has something to amplify their auto attacks, like for example Kog'Maw, or has some on-it effects, then Lethal Tempo would be your go-to rune. It also, you could sometimes take Press the Attack on those champions as well, but Lethal Tempo gives you more consistent damage. Meanwhile, Press the Attack gives you more bursty type damage. Fleet Footwork, the oddball out here, I would say, is you gain this, I would say, buff that when you stacked it up to 100 stacks, your next auto attack gets energized. This goes together with Rapid Fire Cannon and Storm Razor. So how you stack this up is by moving and auto attacking. I think an auto attack gives you about 10, if I'm not wrong. And moving obviously scales you up. So after you've hit 100 stacks, if you then attack something, you would get a burst of movement speed, 20% to be exact, for 1 second, and also get some increased healing. if you do hit this ability on an enemy champion, you gain more healing than if you would hit a minion or if you're a ranged champion. So the healing from minions is 10% effective for ranged champions and 20% effective for melee champions. And on normal targets, it would appear as if it's the same. I'm not sure about that though. But the healing scales from 10 at level 1 to 100 at level 18, plus 0.3% bonus AD and 0.2 AP. So it's not that much healing. It's mostly, it gives you a little bit of extra sustain, but it mainly gives you some movement speed as well. Now moving on to the last keystone, we have Conqueror, which spells and auto attacks can stack this up to max stacks of 12. For melee auto attacks, it is 2 per stack. So every auto attack gives you 2 stacks towards Conqueror, and every ranged auto attack gives you 1 towards those 12 stacks. So for a ranged champion would have to hit the target with 12 auto attacks to fully stack this, meanwhile a melee would only need 6. The difference is every single ability adds 2 to this. There are certain abilities that can stack this faster and give more stacks than 2. For example, Belveth's E counts as multiple strikes, so if Belveth uses her E, it would fully stack Conqueror within a matter of a second and a half, roughly. And auto attack resets are obviously very good with this. And the main difference again between Lethal Tempo and Conqueror is if your damage is mainly spell based, Conqueror gives you that extra damage and oomph and healing. Meanwhile, if you're mainly auto attack based, you would gain more damage from just going Lethal Tempo. The other benefit for Conqueror compared to Lethal Tempo is you don't really gain any HP at max stacks by Lethal Tempo, but when you've fully stacked 12 stacks on Conqueror, you would get 8% healing as a melee champion and 5% as a ranged champion. How do burn effects stack Conqueror? Burn effects count as 1 stack. So if I hit something with a Malzar E and I have Conqueror, it would only give me 2 stacks. But if it's a spammable ability like Cassio E, it would be giving you 2 per thing. Some of these like interactions with example burn effects have different. Yes, Garen E does fully stack Conqueror. If you it, every spin counts as a separate stack on Garen E, so that's a very good reason. They did change it recently so that it does that because it usually didn't do that. That's why Garen's usually took Grasp because they didn't really have a better keystone to go. Now it's mainly Conqueror and Phase Rush. Anyway, so those are the main keystones. If you have any questions about these 4 keystones, feel free to ask them now. Otherwise, I will be moving down to the first row of the sub-runes, I will call them.
Okay, so like press the attack
Yes.
on like Urgot. If I understand the way this works correctly, is it better to sneak like autos in 3 times before you go in because now you get bonus damage? Or do
So
you
how I
like
would
how
do
would
it
you
on
trade with that?
Urgot is if you can get 3 autos in before with either your W or just regular autos, and then like throw a Q or an E or like any like sort of like main other ability that is not auto attacks, then that's always gonna evaluate to more damage than you trying to throw a Q first to then auto attack.
Okay.
Anyways, any other questions about Press the Attack, Lethal Tempo, Flee Footwork, or Conqueror? Also, a thing that Road Trip said here in the chat is do note that there's certain things like Mordekaiser passive where you get an extra Conqueror stack if you do the combo QE auto attack, meaning if you proc your passive on Mordekaiser with an auto attack, you gain an extra stack of Conqueror. Don't ask me why. I don't know why. It's just, it gives you 1 stack extra if you proc your passive on Mordekaiser with an auto attack. which is very similar to Electrocute, where you need to hit an enemy champion with 3 separate abilities. So QE auto, for example, would give you the Mordekaiser passive, and if the last proc is an auto attack, you would gain an extra stack of Conqueror. And I'm not aware of any other specific champions that have similar interactions like that, where the order in which you play the abilities change the outcome of the amount of stacks, but that is one that I am aware of. Anyways, let's move on to the first row. We have Overheal, we have Triumph, and we have Presence of Mind. Overheal is actually going to get a buff next patch, so in a week. So look out for that one. It is mainly taken on ADCs. I don't think I've ever seen any other champion ever take Overheal. But what it does is any healing above 100% will accumulate to a shield from 20 to 100% of the healing that you do, and build up to a healing of 10 plus your max health. So it scales based on your max health, and it gives you a little bit of a shield like Bloodthirster. So building this together with Bloodthirster, it gives you a pretty big shield. Just be mindful that anti-shield makes it then stronger versus you, but that's just a minor detail. I would mainly use this on AD carries where against team comps where you would have to survive extra burst. So this is very fringe situations. In pro play, this is always picked because fights, you don't really look for kills there. And it's mainly, there's one fight that decides half the game in pro play. So having that extra shield for that one fight is more important than maybe getting some extra gold or some missing HP. So Triumph then, it restores 10% of your missing health on a takedown. So if you get an assist or a kill, you gain an additional 20 gold and also missing health. So the lower you are, the more HP you get, meaning the closer the 1v1 is, if you're doing a 2v1 and you kill one person, the more HP you're going to get depending on how low you are. Mostly used on bruisers because they don't really want mana and don't really care about overheal. Now lastly, we have Presence of Mind, which is the most complicated one out of those three, is where it has like 2 passives. The one is takedowns. Instead of giving you missing HP, it gives you maximum mana or energy. And that's the simple part. The other part of it is that damaging an enemy increases your mana regeneration from 1.5 scaling up to 11. And that's only 100% for melee and 80% for ranged. And it's mana per second for every second for 4 seconds. And then for energy users, it is 1.5 energy per second instead. So what this encourages is if you are looking to poke more or your champion requires a lot of mana, then this is most of the time the rune to go for. Let's say you have to spend a lot of mana pushing waves into your opponent as a champion like Caitlyn, and you really will want to like just poke them under tower and just keep staying in lane and just keep pushing in with your mana. It's going to cost a lot of mana, so having that extra mana from Presence of Mind is really valuable. Other champions that really need this are ones that rely on mana to deal their damage. 2 good examples of this would be Kassadin or Anivia. So yeah. Other than that, not really much to say. It used to have some different passes, but these are the current ones. Now to the legend, Alacrity, Tenacity, and Bloodline. They all have the same point system. They all scale up to a max stack of 10. And it starts by Legend Alacrity. You gain 3 attack speed at level 1, no matter what. And then for every stack, you gain 1.5. So in total, you would get 18% attack speed. Do you think Akali needs Presence of Mind or Triumph? I've seen a lot of conflicting thoughts on this. I think Akali as a champion really likes Presence of Mind because her Q is on such a low cooldown, but has very high cost. Meaning that if you want to effectively trade, you get like 2 and maybe even 3 extra Qs if you have Presence of Mind. And I don't see Akali ever needing missing health because she's such a slippery champion. Okay, the next one, very similar. You can stack up to 10. You start off with 5 tenacity. Tenacity gives you resistance versus slows, stuns, everything that's not a knockup or a suppression. You would take this into team comps with a lot of CC, where you need it. ADCs usually don't take this because they usually take cleanse instead, but mostly bruisers or tanks or mages are the ones that take Legend Tenacity. The main conflict on ADCs are between Legend Alacrity and Legend Bloodline. What Legend Bloodline is, it doesn't give you anything at level 0, at level 1. So if you have 0 stacks, that I'll show you in a bit how the stack system works, you gain nothing from this. But at full stacks, at the 10 stacks, you gain an extra 100% and 100 max health, not 100%. So if you have 100, if you have 1000 HP, before you complete this, you would have 1100. Pretty simple. So what this now does is how to get to 1 stack is this. So you gain 100 points per champion, gain 100 points for dragons, barons, and heralds, gain 25 points for large monster kills. So red buff, blue buff, Gromp, like all of the other ones, and then 4 points for minion kills. I am pretty sure you don't even need to be the one last hitting it. I think you just need to be close to them dying. Just keep that in mind. Legend Tenacity, while we're at the topic of it, did recently get nerfed from 30% to 20% this patch actually. So just keep that in mind. When you're like, if you're like on the verge of not taking it last patch, then you probably won't want to be taking it this patch. Legend Alacrity, again, it gives you a lot of attack speed, but really not defensive. I would say if you want to build a lifesteal item, first or second, like you already know, you're playing Ashe, you're going into the game, you're first iteming Bork or Shield Bow, then probably Legend Alacrity is probably better than Legend Bloodline. Meanwhile, if you're doing Legend Bloodline, you have to take this rune if you're building something like Kraken Slayer, PD, IE. If you're playing Jinx, for example, or Caitlyn, and you're not building a lifesteal item, you need to have this rune. Otherwise, every single poke damage you'll ever take as an ADC will amount to you losing a lot of HP that you can't get back. So let's say you take a Lux E to the face mid-game, you lose 300 HP and you have 1500, and you don't have any lifesteal whatsoever, then you have to recall after you get hit by another one. Meanwhile, if you have this, or you have a lifesteal item, you can either back off and take a jungle camp along the way, or just hit the minion wave and you'll back to full HP again. So always keep in mind that you need some sort of healing as an ADC, especially into poke comps. I see somebody's typing up a question, so I'll wait a little bit. If you guys have any question about any of the Legend, Alacrity, Tenacity, or Bloodline, now is the time. Okay, I'll move on to Coup de Grace, Cut Down, and Last Stand. Pretty simple runes. You gain damage based on different conditions. So, okay, I run Legend Tenacity every game right now on Garen. Would it be better to switch over to Legend Alacrity again, since Garen has his W for Tenacity? Normally, yes, that would be the answer. The reason why I'm saying no to this, and you would always take Legend Tenacity on Garen, is the attack speed from Legend Alacrity does not stack, like does not work on Garen's E. And Garen mainly buys attack speed to empower his E, which it does not do. So in that specific case, no, you should always take Legend Tenacity on Garen. Unless they have no CC whatsoever and you're gonna look to split push, then maybe you would take Legend Alacrity. But those team comps are so rare that I wouldn't even try to look for that. It's a good question though. So, Coup de Grace, you deal 8% more damage to champions who have less health than 40%. Pretty simple. Cut Down, you deal 5% to 15% more damage to champions with more max health. Not current health, max health than you. So if you have a champion that has, you have 1000 HP, they have 1100 HP, you would be dealing 5% extra damage because it scales from 10% more than you to 100% more. So if they have 2000 HP and you have 1000, you would be dealing 15% more damage to that target the entire time. Pretty simple. I'll move on. Last Stand. Again, you would take this into tank your HP unit, tank your HP champions. And this you would take this against squishier, so you have a little bit more damage to finish kills off. And then this gives you 5 to 10% increased damage to champions while you're below the thresholds 60 to 30. So with champions like Olaf or Warwick that are like to be on low HPs all the time and fight it out, this rune is a necessity. You would almost never, I think in 99.9% of games, you would never go anything other than Last Stand on both Warwick and Olaf. So also tankier champions like bruisers usually prefer Last Stand anyways, because the more HP you have, and let's say you have 4000 HP and you lose half of it, well then you're already dealing an increase of like 7-8% anyways, and it doesn't matter how much HP the enemies have. So the more HP you have and the more you have to spare, the easier it is to get bonus damage from this rune. Any questions about the Presicion tree, or can I move on to the more bursty assassin tree that's called Domination for burst damage and target access?
Would you suggest using Last Stand as a bot laner if you are an all-in lane?
It depends on your champion. The one ADC that I know takes this sometimes would be Kog'Maw, because I'm pretty sure it increases his passive damage as well. But he's one of these ADCs that like to fight to the death and really get that extra oomph. I could see champions like Draven as well use Last Stands at times. But on an ADC, you mainly don't have that much HP, so you probably get more damage based on cutdown. Because the max damage you get from cutdown is 15%. Meanwhile, on Last Stand, even if you're below 30%, it only goes up to 11%. So on ADCs that would build a little bit tankier, cutdown gives you less value, or maybe Last Stand would be better. But I would say stick to cutdown on most of the time on ADCs. And sometimes if they're really squishy and you're not gonna stay low at times, like against a couple of assassins maybe, then maybe coup de grace is probably the way to go. Yes. Okay. Domination Tree. Woohoo. Okay, so for keystones, we have Electrocute, Predator, Dark Harvest, and Hail of Blades. I will start with Electrocute. Pretty simple. You hit a target with 3 separate abilities within 3 seconds to deal a bonus burst of damage. The cooldown is 25 scaling to 20. So not really that much lower late game than it is early. The damage scales from 30 to 180. Not too good, but not horrible. It has bonus 0.4 AD and 0.25 AP. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Just if you need that extra bit of burst damage and you have good ways of proccing this, go for it. Predator, a pretty situational rune. It doesn't work until you have boots, so never take this in conjunction with magical footwear because you cannot buy boots, but we'll get to that one later. Yeah. Will this be recorded session? I'm kind of late. Yes, it is being recorded right now. We've been recording for 24 minutes, but I will let you know where it's going to land up after I'm done. But yes, it will be recorded. So the cooldown, pretty long for this one. 120 scaling down to 60. Again, you need boots to have this. It makes it so that your boots becomes a usable item, that when you use it, you gain ramping movement speed from 25 to 50% over 1 second, and then afterwards it's always 50, towards enemy champions. So after you've ramped up, the next damage you do to any champion, or yeah, I think they made it so it's only champions and not minions as well. So the next damage you'll be dealing would be increased by 20, scaling to 180. So it's the same at level 18 as Electrocute, with a little bit worse scaling in the damage and AP. But you wouldn't mainly take this for the damage anyway. You would mainly take this for the movement speed. So the champions that would like this are champions that have issues getting into the fight or want to do something really disruptive towards a specific target. So what I'm saying, meaning by that, is a champion like either Vladimir that wants to just get into the fight and drop his ult and his whole combo, or a champion like Veigar is another good one that wants to just run up and place a big cage and try to get as many targets as possible. Twisted Fate wants to get in range with his gold card. So either it's a lot of CC, or it's something disruptive like a Singed or a Skarner that just wants to run at a priority target and then drag them into their team with Skarner ultimate, or just flip them to your team with a Singed flip. So if your champion has movement speed synergies, Predator is probably not too bad. Dark Harvest. Dealing damage to a champion below 50% health makes it so you deal adaptive damage and harvest their souls permanently. Increasing the damage from Dark Harvest by 5 per stack. So it sounds pretty similar to Electrocute. The only difference is it deals less damage than Electrocute, has a higher cooldown, but it does reset the cooldown to 1.5 if the champion dies. So if you get a takedown, it will reset the cooldown and you can proc it on another target. So this is basically the quote-unquote team fight Electrocute that scales. If you can proc this 2 or 3 times, it'll probably give you more value than Electrocute in a team fight. Otherwise, Electrocute will most of the time give you more flat-out value. This damage can be any damage, so damage over time effects that are not items, like Leandris, would proc this. Items like Luden's Echo in that case, or what's the other one, Everfrost, will proc this though. So if you damage someone with a separate attack that is not gonna increase the current damage with burn effects, will proc Dark Harvest. And lastly, we have Hail of Blades, also very similar to Electrocute. It increases your next 3 auto attacks attack speed, and it also makes it so if you have an auto attack resetting ability, like the example I used last time was Darius. So if Darius auto W's, he'll still have another 2 auto attacks of Hail of Blades with the increased attack speed. So you have to hit the target at, preferably 3 times. And if you hit the enemy champion once, you have 3 seconds of the increased attack speed to do 2 more auto attacks. The other 2 auto attacks can be on minions or monsters. They will not be specifically attack speeded against champions. And the cooldown for the entire rune is 12 seconds. The increased attack speed for those 3 auto attacks specifically can exceed the 2.5 maximum attack speed limit mark, but as soon as those attacks are over, it will always go back to what it was before. Anyways, let's go into column 1. I'm gonna have to speed this up, otherwise we'll be here all night. Cheap Shot. Damaging a champion that has been movement impaired or action deals 10 to 45 bonus true damage based on level. So what this means is if a champion has been slowed or stunned recently, then hitting that target with any damage will deal a bit of true damage. Correct me if I'm wrong, Cheap Shot can be activated by Rylas, right? I would think it would do that, yes. Rylas should, in theory, proc Cheap Shot every 4 seconds. If you can have some damage over time effects with Cheap Shot, that would then deal some extra true damage every 4 seconds. I'm not sure if it works with damage over time effects. like Mordekaiser passive. I mean, we can try it out. Like if you want, while I just keep discussing this, you can go into a practice tool and then let me know what the result is. Because on paper it should always work, but Riot Games is not really consistent with how they're wording things and what actually works in the actual game. Does Hail of Blades interact with Varus passive? Yes. Varus passive is an effect per auto attack, so you would only be able to get 3 auto attacks from the Varus passive. It doesn't count as a separate auto attack, but you would be able to quickly stack up 3 stacks of the Varus passive with Hail of Blades, which is the main reason why that's one of the 2 runes that mainly AP Varus takes. Okay, Taste of Blood. Basically a sustain rune. You damage a champion, 20-second cooldown. You gain some extra healing between 16 and 30, scaling from 1 to 18. Not really much to say about it. The scalings are pretty low, so you're not going to get that much healing from it. But if you don't really care about some extra damage and you just want to have some extra HP, there you go. Sudden Impact, the most important one of them all. After exiting stealth or using a dash, leap, blink, or teleport, dealing any damage to a champion grants you 9 lethality and 7 magic penetration for 5 seconds with a 4-second cooldown. So what does this mean? This means, for example, if you exit a bush and you hit a champion within 4 seconds, the time for after you've done your blink is 4 seconds. I'll show you that here actually. Sudden Impact. So here it says it. Dashing or blinking or exiting stealth triggers a sudden impact already, which is the name prepare phrase. The buff lasts for 4 seconds and may be refreshed if you do another dash or another blink or exit stealth again. Dealing any damage while you have this buff for 4 seconds will then give you this sudden impact buff, which is the magic penetration and lethality. And then after you've then done your, like after those 5 seconds, after you did trigger it, it will then go on a 4-second cooldown. A little bit complicated, but I'm sure you'll figure it out. Zombie wards, just like in the Legend Tenacity, Legend Alacrity, and Legend Bloodline, these 3 have a very similar outcome, so to speak. So all of these at the end give you 30 AP or 18 AD. So it's adaptive damage, depending on if you're AD or AP. And the way you get stacks, stacking up to 10, is different. So on Eyeball Collection, it is for every takedown, so kill or assist. On Zombie Ward, it is if your ward expires, not if it's killed, expires, which will then spawn a Ghost Poro, which stays there for 90 seconds, and if enemy champions walk over it, it will get scared and disappear. This does work for invisible champions like Evelynn as well, so just keep that in mind if you really don't know what to do against Evelynn and you don't want to just keep buying pink wards. You can just place a regular ward, and after your regular ward expires, your Ghost Poro would be there, and it would give you a warning ping when it's detected. And then after you've summoned 10 Poros, Ghost Poros, for every Ghost Poro that spawn, and when you spot an enemy up to 10 stacks. Okay. Wait, so let me see this. Gain adaptive AP and AD for every Ghost Poro spawned and when Ghost Poro spots an enemy champion. So if you spot a enemy champion with 5 Ghost Poros, you would have 10 stacks because it would have 1 to summon it and then 1 to detect an enemy champion. For the zombie ward, so if you kill wards, you gain a zombie ward and a stack towards your 10 stacks of collection. I'll just call it collection. And then again, after you've successfully spawned 10 zombie wards, so successfully last hit or been near enemy wards killed, you will gain your extra 10 adaptive force. These all scale up. For every single stack that you gain 2 AP and 1.2 AD. And then once you've reached the max stacks, you gain double the effect. So you stack up to 10 AP, and once you reach 10, you gain 20 AP. And you stack up to 6 AD, and then you gain 12 at the end. Make sense? Good. Now to the treasure ones. So we have Treasure Hunt, or the Hunter ones, not the Treasure ones. Treasure Hunter, we have Ingenious Hunter, we have Relentless Hunter, and we have Ultimate Hunter. What these do is they give you bonuses stacking up to a certain amount depending on how many different enemy champions you have gotten a takedown on. Very similar to Rengar passive if you ever played Rengar. But I'll actually go from right to left because Treasure Hunter works a little bit different than the other ones. So, Ultimate Hunter, it grants you ultimate ability haste per stack and you gain a flat 6 at the start of the game. So in total you will get 6 plus 25 at 5 stacks. So you get 6, and then if you kill the top laner, you gain plus 5, so then you're on 11. You kill the jungler, plus 5 again. Kill the mid laner, plus 5. ADC, plus 5. Support, plus 5. The order does not matter. You just need to be able to get an assist or a kill. You would take this rune on champions that have very high and impactful ultimates. So very high cooldown and very impactful. So a few examples would be Shen, Karthus, Kiana, sometimes Zed, but that's not really that's a little bit inconsistent. It's just that you really want to have his ultimate up as much as possible. But if your ultimate has a high cooldown and it has good impact, then Ultimate Hunter is most of the time going to be the rune for you. Relentless Hunter, the movement speed out of combat rune. You gain a flat 5 movement speed out of combat and plus 8 movement speed per stack. So if you're a roaming champion, or you would like to have Moby boots as your preferred boots, but you can't afford it, like let's say you're playing Poppy, you really need defensive boots, or maybe CDR boots, but you really do want to be able to have that extra rush of movement speed, but you don't want to take Predator. You probably have Predator if you're going Poppy jungle, but these do synergize pretty well to get that extra bit of movement speed, as you might be able to tell. But if you do need movement speed to either roam or to just get into the fight, Relentless Hunter is the way to go. Mostly taken for roaming assassins, and yeah, roaming assassins and champions like Twisted Fate who need to just get close to you once. Okay, Ingenious Hunter, the least used rune as far as I know. It grants you 20 item haste plus an additional 6 item haste per bounty stack. This grants you the biggest original bonus out of all of these, but it also is most of the time not going to be the most useful one. So what this means is that every item that is usable, so Zhonya's, yes, exactly, Zhonya's, Everfrost, Gale Force, Redemption, items like that are getting lowered their cooldown by Ingenious Hunter. And as I was gonna say, that Road Trip mentions here, is that Ingenious Hunter should always be used with Predator boots, because Predator boots make your boots into a usable item. If you don't use these in conjunction, the cooldown is gonna be very punishing for you as a Predator user. So as it says there at the bottom, item haste affects all items with cooldowns. It does not affect things like Banshee's Veil as far as I know. I'm not sure if it impacts Guardian Angel timers. That's something I would have to check. Remind me to do that at the end of the game, or at the end of the go through. Treasure Hunter gain 70 gold for the first bounty, stacking up to 150 on the last one. This is the only one, that's why I took it last, where you gain a bonus where you don't gain the bonus at the end of it. These all have their ability haste at the end. Meanwhile, this one just gives you gold, and after you've gotten to your 5th stack, you don't gain anything more. So I did the math. It adds up to 550 total gold, because it is 70 gold plus 90 plus 110 plus 130 plus 150. So you will gain an extra 550 gold when, oh, where do we have it? When taking this rune. Which champions like to take this? Mainly early game assassins and champions that hard rely on early item power spikes. A big ADC example of this is actually Twitch. He really relies on getting his Bork early on, or if he goes AP, his Nashor's Tooth, so that he can then snowball further. Since this doesn't scale that well, if your champion does not really need an extra 550 gold and would rather have the impact of getting to the fight sooner or being able to roam better or have his ultimate on a lower cooldown, then these items or these ones are the preferred ones. But otherwise, just remember that the max amount of gold you get for Treasure Hunter is 550. Any questions about the Domination Tree? Going once, going twice, going thrice. Okay, there we go. Then let's move on to the Sorcery Tree. We only have 3 keystones here. We have Summon Airy, we have Arcane Comet, and we have Phase Rush. Summon Airy and Arcane Comet are pretty similar. The main difference is on Summon Airy, procs from auto attacks as well. I should probably explain what they do first so that you're not confused. So, damaging enemy champion with basic attacks and abilities makes it so that the area that you see here flies to them and damages them from a base scaling from 10 to 40 damage and an extra 0.1 AP and 0.15 AD. What it also does is if you have something that impacts a friendly champion, like let's say you're playing Jarvan and you press your E down, it gives an aura around it, an attack speed aura, that counts towards empowering an ally. So if you're playing support Jarvan, you would be taking Summon Airy, and your E would then fly out to the nearest ally to the flag, and then give them an extra shield as well. Just something to keep in mind of, that you then could maybe synergize with items like Ardent Sensor if you really wanted to. Just a minor detail, but Arcane Comet is after damaging an enemy with an ability, not an auto attack, a comet hurls towards their location, and if it's on cooldown, it will then lower the cooldown based on the ability, or based on what the ability is. So a single target ability would decrease it by 20%, an area of effect ability would decrease the cooldown by 10%, and a damage over time ability would reduce it by 5%. So what this means effectively is, I'll take Malphite as an example. So Malphite throws his Q, it'll use the Arcane Comet. If he then walks up and presses E, that is a area of effect ability, so it would reduce it by 10%. And if he Qs again before the cooldown is back up, it would then reduce the remaining cooldown by 20%. The cooldown is scaling from 20 seconds at level 1 all the way down to 8, and the damage is scaling from 30 to 100 based on level, plus 0.2 AP or 0.35 AD. So, now to the way of actually using it. The champions that would like to use this are 2 types of champions. You have the types of champions that have abilities that CC or slow, and you have the champions that have a lot of abilities to throw. So the 2 champions I'm going to use for this is Xerath and Malphite, because Malphite's Q slows, meaning that once you hit them with the slowed ability, they can't really dodge the Arcane Comet that easily. If your ability does not have any CC attached to it, you can dodge the Arcane Comet pretty reliably. And also, it has a travel time, so the further away you are from your enemy with Arcane Comet, the more time you have to dodge the damage from Arcane Comet. That's all for this rune. Phase Rush. Hitting a champion with 3 separate attacks or abilities within 4 seconds grants a burst of movement speed, scaling from 15 to 40, and also grants you 75% slow resistance. For melee champions, this is increased from 30 to 60%, and the duration is 3 seconds. Cooldown scales down from 30 seconds at level 1 all the way down to 10 seconds. So what does this mean? If you are a champion that needs movement speed in combat to either keep throwing abilities or being able to safely run away and reposition, this would be the rune for you. Another interesting fact about this is that the slow resistance is really, really strong. So if you're against a champion that relies on a slow and you can afford to go the Sorcery Tree already, then you can probably slot in Phase Rush and have a lot more success against those specific champions. The main example of this would be something like a Nasus relying on his W to catch you. So let's say for some reason you're playing an ADC in the top lane that's not a regular ADC, that you're playing like something like a, I don't know right now, Caitlyn for example, and you're building some sort of weird lethality build and you want to go sorcery. Then maybe you should try to take Phase Rush so that you don't get ran down every single time Nasus presses W on you. Again, this is more of an off-meta suggestion, but this rune can really ruin a lot of champions. Why Garen? So Garen likes this rune because of the fact that he can go in and then go out again. So he can run in, one-shot an enemy champion, and then run out again. So it's like more of a hit and run style. And the same thing is he sometimes can't really trade into champions. Like for example, Garen versus Darius. If he doesn't have Phase Rush, he usually can't even ever walk up to Darius because Darius will just make it into an all-in, which Garen does not want to. So what do you do to counter that? Well, you have Phase Rush, so you auto QE, and then while they're silenced, you just run out with a Phase Rush. Make sense? Okay, now to the Nullifying Orb. Would auto Q proc it? Yes, it would. Do you think Maokai top would be good with Phase Rush on top? If you're going AP and you think that you want to go top lane, then sure. But if you're going tank, I would suggest you going Grasp instead of Phase Rush on Maokai top lane. But it's really up to you. I don't think if you're ever going tank, I don't think Phase Rush is that good of an option. If you want a movement speed alternative for tank Maokai, then I would think Predator would give you more value. But you can try it. Anyways, Nullifying Orb. It grants you a magic damage shield that absorbs 35 to scaling to 110 magic damage based on a level. It also has very small AP and AD ratios, but I don't really count that. So when would you take this? Well, if you're in the Sorcery Tree, you're playing into very high bursty AP assassins. So let's say you're playing Syndra and you're laning versus a LeBlanc or a Fizz or a Diana, then maybe going Nullifying Orb will save you from being in these kill ranges. Other than that, has a pretty high cooldown, not really that great. But would PR be better for split pushing versus Conqueror? Phase Rush. Oh, okay. Would Phase Rush be better for split pushing versus Conqueror? I'm assuming Garen. It really depends. I would say they both have value. If you can kill your opponent in a 1v1 and maybe a 1v2 with the extra damage that Conqueror provides you, then I do believe that Conqueror is better. But normally when you're split pushing, you're a distraction, right? So what you do is you can walk up further with Phase Rush, attack an enemy champion 3 times, and then run away. Then you wait between 30 and 10 seconds. When you're split pushing, it's usually going to be cooldown around 20 seconds, and you do it again. So I would say Phase Rush usually will be the better choice, but if you already have a lot of movement speed and you really just need damage, I think Conqueror can give you the value. Anyways, going over to Mana Flow Band. I will give you some interesting synergies because I feel like this tree has the most synergy out of all of them, like between like which ones you take here. And then also I think the Resolve tree has some decent synergies as well. Meanwhile, the other two are more general in that sense. Anyways, Mana Flow Band, you can stack up to 10 on this one as well. And how you do that is you hit an enemy champion with an ability, giving you 25 maximum mana for each stack, scaling up to 250 max. Once you reach that maximum, meaning you've hit an enemy champion 10 times, different times between an interval of 15 seconds, you will then gain 1% of your missing mana every 5 seconds. So the champions that would like to do this are again ones that want to spend a lot of mana poking or just using a lot of mana in general. Because the more value, the lower mana you are, the more missing mana you gain every 5 seconds after you fully stack this. Other champions that like to use this are ones that again have abilities that are targeted, or abilities that they just throw out and they have very big AoEs and easy to hit. So again, I'll take Xerath and Malphite as good examples for Mana Flow Band users. Malphite has a targeted Q ability with pretty high mana cost, and Xerath has just 3 skill shots as his main 3 abilities, and then another 3 skill shots on his ultimate. So a lot of skill shots, and if you hit any of them, you gain mana. So both of them really do appreciate that. Now, for the last one in the Sorcery Tree first column, we have a Nimbus Cloak. So you gain a burst of movement speed that lasts for 2 seconds and allows you to pass through units. So you get the ghosting buff for 2 seconds after using a summoner spell, and the movement speed amount is dependent on the cooldown of the summoner spell used. So the highest one that I know of would be Teleport and Flash, which should both give you around 25 movement speed. And the lowest one would be Smite, which should give you around 5%. I'm not sure exactly on the numbers on those two, but they should roughly add up to that. Again, champions that really like that extra bit of movement speed would like to have this. Now to the second column, we have Transcendence. Gives you following bonuses reaching levels. So at level 5 you gain 5 ability haste, at level 8 you also gain 5 ability haste, and at level 11 is the big one, is where on champion takedown your base abilities cooldowns are reduced by 20%. So if your champion has a lot of high cooldowns and important cooldowns as well that you need to like fully use, like you use one full rotation to one-shot somebody, like let's say you're playing Syndra, using QEW late game to one-shot the enemy support, then you would have this and then you would get them reduced so you can do it again within the next 5 seconds rather than waiting another 8 or 9 seconds. So I'm just hydrating a bit. So if you want ability haste and you have good champion rotations with cooldown reduction, you would probably look to go Transcendence. Now moving on to the next one is Celerity. All movement speed bonuses are increased by 7% on you. So they're 7% more effective on you, and you gain 1% movement speed flat, level 1. And so what does this mean really? So if you can look at the previous examples that we've had, you gain a burst of movement speed from Phase Rush, you gain a burst of movement speed from Nimbus Cloak, and you gain all those get increased by 7% from Celerity. So as you can see here that Sorcery does have synergies built into their tree. and how much movement speed you really want, combined with like mana and cooldown reduction and so on and so forth, you have to figure out yourself for your different champion. But champions that really like this are champions like Hecarim that can make use of the movement speed and convert it to something else. So Hecarim in this case can convert the movement speed into damage, and other champions like Vladimir and Jhin, for example, use it to either go in or reposition themselves with the extra movement speed. Now, moving on to the last one in this, we have Absolute Focus, which is basically the polar opposite of Last Stand here, where you gain extra damage, in this case ability power or attack damage, based on if you're above 70% HP. So if your champion usually has not that much HP to begin with, or usually wants to stay back and be above 70% health for most of the time, then this would be the rune for you. The main two uses I can see for this are long range mages and AD carries that have good AD scalings. Champions like Caitlyn, Jinx would really like this. And then you have other champions like Xerath and Ziggs would also like this. But on those two champions, they're always going to conflict between having that extra bit of ability haste to be able to throw out more abilities rather than throwing out more powerful abilities. Again, the ability power scales from level 1 to 18, starting at 1.8 AD or 3 AP, depending on which your adaptive force is. Okay, moving on to the last one, we have Scorch, Water Walking, and Gathering Storm. Scorch gives you an extra 20 scaling to 40 damage, bonus magic damage after 1 second after hitting an ability. This miniature ability has a 10-second cooldown, so if your champion does a lot of pokey damage early with, let's say, again, we'll take Malphite as an example, with Arcane Comet and Mana Flow Band, you want to throw an ability every 15 seconds here, every 20 seconds here, and every 10 seconds here. So if your champion has good cooldowns for all of this, then those are pretty good synergies together as well. This is mostly an early game tool because this doesn't really scale that well into the late game. It does get outscaled by Gathering Storm at 10 minutes, but if you want to be effective before that, Scorch is your guy, is your option, is your dude. So feel free to go that. Water Walking is the roaming option for the Sorcery Tree. It gives you extra movement speed and adaptive force in the river. So if you like to roam quicker or you like to fight in river and at skull crab fights or dragons or barons, Water Walking is your choice. The one specific interaction that Water Walking does have that I know of is with the champion Rise, where he gains mana when he walks into the river based on his AP. So if he walks into the river, he gains more AP, meaning he'll gain more mana regen. Don't ask me why that works, but it does. Then Gathering Storm, pretty simple. Every 10 minutes you get AP and AD. AP or AD, depending on what your main is. So you gain adaptive force every 10 minutes. That scales very well. As you can see, at 10 minutes you gain 8 AP, at 20 you gain 24, then 48. So it 3 doubles from 10 to 20, then it doubles from 20 to 30, then it almost doubles again from 30 to 40, and then it increases by 40, 48. So it increases by quite a bit. And if you ever, for some reason, are in a 60-minute game, there's going to be a big difference if you have Gathering Storm or not. Champions that like this are ones that scale pretty well into the mid and late game, ones that scale pretty hard on 2-3 items. So again, ADCs come in mind. That's why secondary on ADC, you'll often see Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm combined, because the champions that like Absolute Focus will usually also like Gathering Storm. So just keep that in mind. Any questions about the Sorcery Tree or anything you want to add? Feel free to do so now. Otherwise, I'll be moving on to the Resolve Tree. Good, then let's move on to the Resolve Tree. So the Resolve Tree, mainly used for being used by tanks and having some good early game options that are pretty annoying to deal with if somebody has taken Resolve as secondary. So the first one we have here as the keystones is Grasp of the Undying. Every 4 seconds when you're in combat, there's a stacking charge that stacks up after 4 seconds, and after you've hit that, your next auto attack against an enemy champion will give you some benefits. It will deal bonus damage equal to 3.5%, bonus magical damage equal to 3.5% of your max health, and it also heals you for 1.7% of your max health, and it permanently increases your max health by 5. So if you can consistently hit this and your champion scales with HP and can buy a lot of HP, you're gonna heal more, deal more, and gain more HP. So it's like a miniature version of Heartsteel that also heals you on the hits and deals damage based on your HP. Do note that the healing, damage, and max health gained from this is reduced for ranged champions. So, for example, Jace, if he uses a ranged auto attack with this, will get 3 HP, but if he uses a melee one, he will get 5. If you ever were to go grasp Jace, be mindful that if you auto attack somebody with ranged form and instantly change back to melee before the auto attack hits, you will gain the full value of the melee auto attack, meaning you would get 5 HP and extra damage and healing. But then again, on Jace you probably would not take Grasp unless you're going for some fun off-meta build. Just keep that in mind, but I'll move on to the next one. Again, champions that can use this mainly would be stuff like Shen and Mundo, because they both have HP scalings on their abilities, and they also have consistent way of proccing the hits. Okay, now I'll move on. After immobilizing an enemy champion, increase your armor and magic resist by 35 plus 80% of your bonus resistances for 2.5 seconds. After those 2.5 seconds, explode around you and deal magic damage to nearby enemy champions. Nearby enemies, it does to minions as well, actually. The damage, 25 scaling to 120 plus 8% of your bonus health. Cooldown is 20 seconds. Resistances bonus from Aftershock are capped at 80 to 150 based on level. So what this tells me is you can at most gain 150 extra armor and magic resist at level 18. So when would you use this and who would you use this on? Okay, you would use this on a champion that would like to go in the middle of the fight and CC an enemy champion and then try to get as much focus on you as possible for these 2.5 seconds so you can absorb as much damage as possible while you have the extra resistances. A champion that would use that, as I can see here in the chat, we have Leona. Other good examples would be stuff like Ornn sometimes, if he's the solo engage and you really don't have any other melees. And Nautilus is one of those who would sometimes use it. But don't think of this as something you would ever use for damage. This is purely a defensive tool, in my opinion, and should be looked at it as a big buff for short seconds, like a Gargoyle Stone Plate, for example, is how you're supposed to look at this. The reason why the ratios are so high for bonus resistances and bonus health is because back in the day, champions like Lysandra and Sylas would use this while building full AP, and then they would be very tanky for 2.5 seconds while going in and not building any resistances whatsoever. Riot didn't like this, so they nerfed it for AP champions, but buffed it for tankier champions. Moving on to the supportive option of the bunch, Guardian. So guard allies within 350 units of you, the allies you target with spells for 2.5 seconds. While guarding, if you or the ally take more than a small amount of damage, over the duration of the guard, both of you and the ally that you're guarding will get a shield for 1.5 seconds. This sounds very ridiculous, and I'll try to explain what that actually means in normal terms. So if you're standing close to somebody, you have a small aura with 350 units, that if you or the person in that aura, anyone in that aura, takes, as you can see at the bottom, proc threshold 90 to 250 post mitigation damage, you would then gain a shield scaling from 45 to 120 plus 12.5 of your ability power and 8% of your bonus health. So you gain like a burst of shield every 90 seconds to scaling down to 40 seconds when either you or the person that you're quote unquote guarding takes that damage. Another way, when you're not standing that close to your target and you still want to guard somebody, if you do use an ability on a friendly target, like let's say you're playing Lulu and you're pressing W or E on that target, then that would count as you targeting them with a spell, meaning that they would also have the guard function for a total of 2.5 seconds after the shield. So you don't need to stand on your target to shield them, you just need to be able to assist them with spells or standing next to them to have this effect be procced. When would you take this then? So you would take this when you're into champions with high burst damage. So let's say you're playing Leona, Kog'Maw versus Nami Lucian. Normally on Lulu you have the option of going Aerie, as we spoke on earlier, because she deals damage and she shields, so Aerie kind of gives her a little bit of both. But into that lane, I would say go Guardian, because your only real threat is being outbursted rather than losing the all-in fight. Because Kog'Maw does a lot more damage over time than Lucian will, so just trying to keep your carry alive for a little bit more burst, that will give you more value than trying to deal some extra damage yourself. Now to the first row here in the resolve tree, we have Demolish, Font of Life, and Shield Bash. Demolish, pretty simple. You walk close to a tower within 600 range of it. I think tower range is a little bit higher. I think like 700 or 800, maybe 750. I'm not sure, but you have to at least walk into tower range a little bit further to then start ticking down the 3 seconds. After those 3 seconds, if you auto attack the tower, it deals 100 damage plus 35% of your max HP as bonus physical damage. So if you have 1000 HP, it would deal 100 plus 350 damage towards that tower. It's gonna get mitigated by the tower's armor, but it would deal roughly around 300 damage, maybe 250. Cooldown is 45 seconds, and it's very strong if you're a tankier champion with a lot of HP, which again synergizes pretty well with Grasp, that gives you max health. Anyways, Font of Life. Impairing the movement speed of an enemy champion marks them for 4 seconds. Any allied champion auto-attacking that target will heal for 5 plus 0.9% of your max health over 2 seconds. So what does this mean? Again, let's say you're playing Lulu or Ornn and you're slowing an enemy champion and your AD carry attacks the target, then they would be healing for 5 plus 1% of your max health over 2 seconds. So if your max health is 1000, again not that high for a tank, you would be healing the target that attacked the slowed or movement impaired target for the AD carry that attacked it would heal for 5 plus 10, because, or in this case, probably 9. So it would be 14 over 2 seconds per auto attack. Maybe not a lot, but again, a little bit of healing is a little bit of healing. And if you can't make use of Demolish, because you're in a bad matchup and you don't really have good shields, then Font of Life is still a great option for you as either a tank or a support that wants to just make sure their team gets value from you being able to CC them. Anyway, moving over to Shield Bash. While shielded, gain 1 to 10 armor and magic resist based on level. Whenever you gain a new shield, your next basic attack against an enemy champion deals an extra 5 to 30 based on level, plus 1.5% bonus health and 8.5% of the new shield amounts bonus adaptive damage. You also have 2 seconds after the shield expires to use this effect. So let's say you get shielded by a Lulu, the shield is 200, then you would be dealing, at level 1, you'd be dealing 5 damage, plus an extra, I'm just going to ignore the bonus health, plus an extra, how much is it, 200 shield? Plus an extra 18 damage. 17, not 18. But again, you just deal an extra 18 damage while having a shield. Might not seem like a lot, but if your auto attacks normally do between 50 and 60 or even 70 damage on level 1, you gain an extra burst of damage that is 18. I would say that that's a pretty good deal. Again, the bigger the shield, the bigger the damage. You gain some extra armor and magic resist when you have damage. And you don't need to be the one giving you the shield, meaning if your team has a lot of heals and shields, you can still use this. Conditioning, second wind, and bone plating is the third option, the third row, or the second miniature row for the resolve tree. Conditioning is the scaling option, because after 12 minutes you gain 8 armor and magic resist, and all your bonus magic resist is increased by 3%. It used to be more, but they nerfed it down a little bit. So you gain extra armor and magic resist, and your future buys and past buys of armor and magic resist are increased by 3%. It's not a lot, but it gives you good late game value compared to the other two here. Second win, after taking damage from an enemy champion, you heal for 4% of your missing HP, plus 3 over 10 seconds. So, again, for every single damage you take from an enemy champion, you're going to start healing for 4% of your missing health over 10 seconds, plus an extra 3 health. Combined with Doran's Shield gives you a lot of sustain versus high poke lanes in any lane. Top lane, jungle, no, maybe not jungle, but top lane, mid, and bot lane, doesn't matter. You gain a lot of healing over time with this rune, especially if you can have a shield to tank damage. So let's say you're playing Shen, you're trading with somebody, you take some damage, and you shield, and you take more damage. The shield blocks up the damage, and you still gain some HP at the end of it. Maybe a little bit specific there, but gives you a lot of value into ranged champions. This one is more into very high burst again, like we had earlier with Aftershock. This is a little bit similar, the conditions are just different. So after taking damage from an enemy champion, the next 3 spells from the same champion you receive take 30, scaling up to 60 less damage per hit. So let's say at level 1, you're playing against a champion that quickly hits you with Hail of Blades auto attacks 4 times. He'll hit you 4 times. Within the duration of 1.5 seconds, you will then have reduced 90 damage of the enemy target. That seems like a pretty good deal to me. The only issue with this is the cooldown is very high, it's almost a minute, and also it needs to be the same target that procced it off of you. The next 3 spells from that attacker within 1.5 seconds has to do the damage to you. So if you're playing bot lane and the support hits you with an auto attack and then the ADC with Hail of Blades hits you 3 times, you're not going to have any reduced damage from that. Anyways, again, if you're playing against champions that have to go all in to do their damage, bone plating is an excellent option. Otherwise, second wind most of the time gives you more value in laning phase. Now, to the last row here. Good into Darius set. Into set, I think yes. Darius less so, because Darius actually, if you time it wrong and you take a trade with Darius and you have 1 stack of Darius passive on you, like the bleed effect, that will proc as the damage effect. on bone plating. So it's a little bit of double-edged sword into Darius, but it can work into Darius if you really need it. Really good against all-in lanes. Meanwhile, this one's better into poke lanes. Anyways, Overgrowth, again, also just like Grasp of the Undying, is more of a scaling lane. You absorb life essence from monsters and enemy minions that die near you, permanently gaining 3 maximum health for every 8 seconds. When you've absorbed 120 monsters or enemy minions, you gain an additional 3.5% max health. Again, synergizing very well with Grasp of the Undying and Demolish as well. I figured it'd be good against Darius because the damage kind of sticks. Yeah, you will always reduce 1 bleed tick into Darius if it hits you once, but you shouldn't really worry about 1 bleed tick into Darius. You would get more HP from second wind because it would refresh after every single damage over time effect. So you would still have the second wind after fighting Darius for 5 seconds ago. Anyway, back to Overgrowth. So again, you don't need to be last hitting these minions, they just need to die near you. The radius is pretty high, and once you reach those 120 monsters or minions, you gain a pretty big bump in your max health. And it's still gonna keep going after that, so yeah, it's not really much. It's just a lot of HP. It's not that much at the end of a game, it's like 200 or 300, but... Revitalize. Gain 5% heal and shield power. Heals and shields cast on you or received are 10% stronger on targets below 40% HP. So shields and heals that you cast on yourself or on other champions, when the target that gets the shield is below 40%, is increased by 10%. So champions that like to be on low HP, like that have Last Stand, for example, really also like Revitalize most of the time. Or Unflinching because they have similar effects. But it's when you're lower, you gain more heal and shields on you. Other than that, again, if you have a lot of shields and heals on your team, having Shield Bash and Revitalize combined can give you some very nice value, because it like works off of each other. You gain a bigger shield, and that means you deal a little bit of extra damage with that auto attack. Anyway, moving on to the last one in the Resolve tree. Gain 5% tenacity and slow resistance, so you gain both. These values increase up to an additional 20 tenacity and 20 slow resistances based on missing health. The max value is the same as with Last Stand, is achieved at 30% health. So most of the time, if your champion does like extra damage on low HP, they probably like having extra slow resistance and health at low HP. Any questions about the Resolve tree? Or do we move on to the final tree of the evening, I guess? I lost Wi-Fi. Thought that whole thing. What did you miss? Did you miss the unflinching part, or did you miss... What did you miss here? I'll just move on and then we can come back to if you missed one of those. I can quickly go over them again. Anyway, so inspiration is more of the, as they say here, creative tools and rule bending. It's mostly trying to cheat your way to get gold. And what I mean by that is that a lot of these are just ways to get resources or gold easier. The only contradiction to this would maybe be Glacial Augment, which is the first one I'll go over. But Glacial Augment, immobilizing an enemy champion will cause 3 Glacial Rays to emanate from the target that was immobilized. So not slowed, but CC'd, so hard crowd control. After you hit the champion, it will create 3 frozen zones for 100% of the CC duration, plus 3 seconds. So if you hit something that CCs for 2 seconds, the race will stay there for 5 seconds in total. The race slow for 30% plus 9% per 10% heal and shield power, plus 3% of 100 AP, plus 4% per 100 bonus attack damage, which is quite a bit to say, but basically, if your champion has heal and shield power, which they could gain from either items or revitalize, your slows would be more effective. And if you have more AP and AD, they would also become more effective. The last effect that Glacial Augment also has, on top of this, is it reduces the damage the slowed targets do by 15% towards your allies, meaning it doesn't work on you. It basically exhausts the champions against your allies. That's why this is not used in a solo lane, mostly used by supports. The cooldown is 25 seconds, and the rays are not random, they are targeted towards the nearest 3 champions, whether that's allies or enemies. Okay, that's about it. Any question about Glacial Augment, let me know. Otherwise, I'll move on to Unsealed Spellbook. Very simple rune or keystone. You don't have a keystone, you can swap out one of your summoner spells in game for a singular usage. So what this means is after initial 5 minutes, you can choose to swap out one of your summoner spells out of combat with another one. So let's say you necessarily needed TP to get back to your lane, you just died at 5 minutes, and you have Flash Ignite. Well, now you can take Teleport, get back to lane, and then not miss those CS. Then the cooldown for each swap is So the original first swap becomes available at 6 minutes, and the swap cooldown is 5 minutes, and the swap cooldown gets reduced by 25 seconds for each unique summoner spell chosen to. You will see when you have this in game, you will see the ones you've already picked as being a little bit darker in contrast to the ones you haven't picked yet, so you'd know which one you need to pick for a new one to get the extra cooldown reduction on the swap itself. Another note to mention is after you used a swapped summoner spell, you must swap 3 more times before you can select the same thing again. Meaning, if you use teleport the first time, you'd have to swap to heal, exhaust, cleanse, and then you can swap back to TP. But if you do separate ones, like let's say you do teleport, heal, exhaust, cleanse, ignite, that would then reduce the swap cooldown by 25 seconds each, because you used ones you hadn't had before. So just keep that in mind, whether or not you want to use the same summoner spell again, or if you want to reduce the swap so you can swap sooner next time. That's a little bit of a debacle, but the last thing to note is that smite damage is increased after 2 summoner spell swaps. So I'm not sure if you get the 900 or the 1200 smite, but I would assume 900. Not 100% on that though. But what I do know is that earlier last season, or maybe the season before that, this wasn't the case. So what would happen is there was a short meta where people in mid lane would take Unsealed Spellbook, swap to smite at 6 minutes, and then have a 900 damage smite when all the other junglers only had 450. Pretty broken if you ask me. Again, they have fixed it now, so it is all good. The last keystone for the entire game would be First Strike. Pretty simple. If you hit your enemy before they hit you or within 0.25 seconds of them hitting you, you gain 5 gold plus the next damage you'll be causing for the next 3 seconds will deal 9% extra damage, and you'll be gaining gold depending on the bonus damage you dealt from that 9%. Meaning, if you deal 100 damage, if you're a melee character, you would gain, if you're 100 bonus damage, you would gain 100 gold. If you deal as a ranged champion 100 damage, you would only gain 70% because it's reduced for ranged champions, because it's a lot easier for ranged champions to get into combat before melees can. The cooldown is 25 to 15 seconds. The main usages for this are melee champions that have high range poke spells, or champions that like the inspiration tree and also can hit first in their matchup. A good example of this would be Gangplank, that has a ranged ability on his Q, targeted as well, so you can't really avoid it. And he really likes gold, so yeah. If your champion really does like gold, this does scale pretty well into the late game because it's like an extra 9% damage. But once you're full build, you obviously can't get more gold as it goes on. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword in which like you gain less gold early on and more late game, but you need less gold late game. The other uses for this is assassins. So champions like Rengar or Evelynn that can get out of stealth and start damaging you before you get the chance to damage back. Also like this because again they like extra damage and they like gold. Okay, the first 3 runes, you get to pick something that you get for free. Either free boots, a free stopwatch, or Hex Flash. So we start with Hex Flash. Hex Flash Flash Traption. While Flash is on cooldown, it's replaced by Hex Flash. Hex Flash is similar to Flash, but you have to channel it for 2 seconds, and then you get to blink. It has a 20-second cooldown, but you can't use it in combat, and if you try to, it will not let you. It goes on a 10-second cooldown if you enter combat. If you press it before entering combat, it doesn't matter, you can still use it even if you're almost dying. If you used it before entering combat, that is. We just check that the recording is still going. It is, very nice. Magical footwear. So the downside of magical footwear is you cannot buy boots. At 12 minutes, you will get boots for free, and they're better than normal boots because they give you an extra 10% movement speed, or 10 flat movement speed, not 10%. You can get access to these boots earlier if you kill people. So for each takedown that you do, it reduces the cooldown of which you get the boots by 45 seconds. If you check your extra stats in the in-game tab, it will give you the correct timer for when you would receive your boots. If you have a full 6 different items at the 12-minute mark and you didn't get a single kill, you will not receive the boots until a slot is opened up. The boots will not disappear, they will just wait until you either sell an item or you use your potions. Perfect timing. So you start the game with a commencing stopwatch, and you can't use it until 14 minutes. Just as with free boots, you can reduce that cooldown on takedowns. So for every takedown you get, it reduces the entire timer by 2 minutes. So if you get 2 kills, you get the stopwatch at 10 minutes. If you get 4 kills, you get it at 6 minutes. Yeah, that's about it. If I didn't do that, 8 minutes, not 6 minutes, I'm sorry. So, no, it's 2 minutes per use. So 2 kills would be 10 minutes, 4 kills would be 6 minutes. Yes, okay. I thought I did the incorrect math. So what stopwatch is, if you didn't know, it is a Zhonya's effect. So when you click it, you become invulnerable for 2.5 seconds, but you can't cast any spells or abilities. It is a one-time use, and you can build this item into Stopwatch or Guardian Angel, and it will reduce the cost of those items, not by the original Stopwatch cost, which would be 750. I think it reduces it by 160 or something along those lines. Now to the third one, Futures Market. You can enter debt to buy items. The amount you borrow increases over time. So, for every minute into the game, you gain 5 more gold that you can go over the limits. What does this mean exactly? So, 10 minutes into the game, you cannot use it at level 1. That would be broken. Every single champion would take this. Maybe not everyone, but it would be very broken if you could have an extra 150 gold at minute 1. You can start going into that at minute 2. But what this means is if you're about to hit a big item, but you're missing 200 gold at minute 10, you would then be able to go into debt by 150, which is the base one, plus 5 times the amounts of minutes into the game. So at 10 minutes, it would be 5 times 10, which would be 50 gold. So you'd be able to go into a 200 gold debt, which is displayed in your shop at the bottom right. So why would you ever take this? Well, again, it is so that you can get to your power spikes sooner and getting back on the map sooner rather than having to stay for 1 or 2 more waves and then getting back on the map. Because if you have Futures Market and your opponent does not, and you get to your important power spikes before they do, then it doesn't matter if you lose 50 gold, because if you're back to lane with a lost chapter as a mage and they only have 2 books and boots, 2 amp tomes and boots, then you'll be able to sit there and push them under tower for the rest of the laning phase and maybe force their teleport out of them or something else. And that's gonna grant you a lot more than 50 gold. The reason why I'm saying 50 gold is it will negate 50 gold for you going into debt. So not only if you do buy an item and you go into the 200 gold debt after you walk out of fountain, you'll be walking out of fountain with a negative 250 gold. What that means is you can't really buy any items, and you would have to, if you get a kill, you would then, and it gives you 300 gold, you would then go to plus 50 gold when you were at negative 250. Pretty simple maths. Minion Dematerializer. Okay, you start the game with an item called the Minion Dematerializer. It has 3 stacks that you can use to click on enemy minions. They will instantly absorb the minion after a short delay of like 1.5 seconds. And you will gain the minion, it will kill it, and you can be happy that you'll never miss a cannon for 3 waves with cannon minions, and after 3 minutes, because after you can't use it at the first wave. The first time you can use it is after 3 minutes into the game, 180 seconds. What does this do? Now, not only does it give you 3 free kills on minions, it also gives you increased damage towards that minion type. Example, if you choose to use 1 Dematerializer on a cannon minion, or a siege minion as they're called, you will gain 6% bonus damage towards all siege minions for the rest of that game. If you use it on another siege minion, the extra one will not be plus 6, it will be plus 3. So if you either put all of them into 3 melees, then you will gain an extra 12% damage against melee minions. If you put them all into ranged minions, you would do 12 damage towards ranged. If you do 1 of each, you would do 6% versus all minion types. Any question? So the champions that used to run this would be champions like Gangplank, would have specific damage intervals at level 7 and 9, where he would be able to, if he used it on a ranged minion, a Dematerializer, he'd be able to last hit minions on the backline with his Q. And why that was so important is that he could get towards his item passive and his ultimate upgrades faster. Another example of this would maybe be, for example, if you're playing Nasus or something and you need to like last hit minions with a damage ability and you can't last hit melees with a Q at some point, then maybe if you have that extra 6%, you will be able to. That's basically the use of it. You just gain extra damage towards minions. Also makes it easier to CS, of course. Biscuit Delivery, you gain a total biscuit of everlasting will every 2 minutes all the way up until 6 minutes. In total, 3 cookies. Each of these cookies grant 8%. They restore 8% of your missing health and mana. Missing health and mana means the lower health and mana you are, the more value you get out of these cookies. So if you just lost 150 HP and you have the option between eating a cookie or just a regular potion, take the regular potion, because the cookie gives missing mana and HP. So the lower your health and the lower your mana, the more HP and mana you get. Consuming or selling this biscuit permanently increases your mana cap by 40. Similar to Mana Flow Ban in the Sorcery Tree, it gives you a total of 120 maximum mana. For manaless champions, you gain 12% missing health per cookie instead. Is it worth it? You decide. Selling these cookies gives you only 5 gold, so if you're taking this, you better take it into a difficult lane, otherwise you're not really gaining that much value from it. But yeah, I would say that unless you're into a difficult matchup where you need the extra mana or HP, then I think cookies are pretty useless. I think you gain a lot more value out of futures market specifically, especially because of the things we talked earlier, where if you get to your item spike sooner, you get to do more and you get to impact the game earlier, which can have a lot of positive impacts. Now to the final 3 runes before we talk about the quick stats. Cosmic Insight, very simple, 18% summoner spell haste, meaning your summoner spells come off quicker, and 10% item haste, which is similar to Ingenious Hunter, meaning if you use stuff like Zonia's and you have Cosmic Insight, you'll get it off a little bit sooner. Approach Velocity, you gain 7% movement speed towards enemy champions that movement speed has been impaired, meaning slow, stun, whatever. Like any sort of movement speed impairation that would proc the same things as sudden impact and the Domination Tree would work on approach velocity. This bonus is increased to 15% if you are the one doing the CCing. So why does this matter? Why do we care about this rune? Well, the champion that cares most about this rune is Ashe, because every single auto attack grants her movement speed towards enemy champions. If you're playing with an Ashe, you can still take approach velocity and gain that movement speed halved for every single time she hits a W, hits an auto attack, or anything. It does work with Rylai's? Yes, it does work with Rylai's. I am 100% certain of this because a Mordekaiser ADC main that I know plays approach velocity as secondary runes on Mordekaiser ADC with Rylai's. So I will tell you this definitely does work. Yes. And then for the last one, we have Time Warp Tonic. Consuming a potion or a biscuit, meaning this biscuit do work together with Time Warp Tonic, consumes 30% of its maximum mana and health restoration immediately, and then it's gonna flat out to the normal amount at the end. It also grants you 2% movement speed during its effects. So the only time I would ever suggest you taking Time Warp Tonic is if you're starting with Corrupting Potion, which is the 500 gold item. Corrupting Potion, this one, which then would give you the 30% of the 100 HP and 30% of the 75 mana over 12 seconds. You would gain it instantly. You would gain a lot of it instantly, meaning it can give you a burst of health and mana, and you also gain a lot of movement speed since this has 3 charges and it can get refilled on backing. That would be the best synergy I would have for you on with the rune Time Warp Tonic. So now for when should you pick what in the stats tree. Adaptive Force, 80 or AP, 9 AP, or I think it's 6 AD. attack speed, and ability power, or ability haste. Magic resist armor, pretty self-explanatory, scaling HP. So, the only times where I would say armor is more valuable than HP late game is if you can. I talked to Vamaris about this. He said that the damage your jungle pet in this season does scales off of your armor and magic resist. So taking an extra point into armor can make it so your clear is faster. Other than that, if you're looking for scaling, having the HP is going to give you more value than MR and magic resist. Otherwise, you usually take whatever you need defensively in your lane. If you don't think you need any armor or magic resist against your current opponent because you think you're both just going to sit there and scale, scaling HP is going to be your better friend. Attack speed, usually take on ADCs and mages. Mages so that you can see us better with auto attacks, and AD carries because 10% attack speed is quite a bit compared to 680. Anyways, that's all I have for you guys today. I'm sorry this took a lot longer than I wanted it to, but there's a lot of runes to go through, so I am now done. I will stop the recording in about 30 seconds. If you have anything you want on there, you can speak now, otherwise I will stop the recording. And if you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to ask them now. I'll stop the recording in 3, 2, 1. Goodbye.